You're sitting there with $100,000 in your savings account. Maybe it took you 5 years to save it, maybe 10. You finally hit that six-figure milestone, and it feels incredible. You tell yourself you're being responsible, you're being smart, you're keeping it safe, and then one day you log into your account and you realize something absolutely terrifying. Your money is dying. It's just slowly dying. And the worst part? You're the one killing it. My name is Dan, and I spend way too much time thinking about what people do wrong with their first $100,000. If you're someone who's worked your butt off to save a significant chunk of money, but you're paralyzed by the fear of doing the wrong thing with it, or you're just letting it sit there because you don't know what else to do, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Here's the thing. Having $100,000 saved is an incredible achievement. According to the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances, the median household savings account balance in America is around $8,000. So if you've got $100,000, you're already in like the top 15% of savers in this country. You should be proud of yourself. But here's what most people don't realize. The moment you hit that milestone is actually the most dangerous financial moment of your entire life. Not because you might lose the money, but because of what most people do next, which is absolutely nothing. Look, I see this pattern constantly. Someone grinds for years, makes sacrifices, skips vacations, drives the old car, lives below their means, and then they finally hit $100,000. And what do? They put it in a high-yield savings account, earning maybe 4% if they're lucky, and they just sit on it. Like a dragon hoarding gold, except dragons don't have to worry about inflation eating their gold alive. Let me show you the math that should genuinely terrify you. Let's say you have $100,000 sitting in a savings account, earning 4% interest. That sounds pretty good, right? You're making $4,000 a year doing absolutely nothing. Free money. Except here's the problem. Inflation over the last few decades has averaged around 3.2% per year. Some years it's higher. We saw 8% in 2022. Some years it's lower. But let's just use that long-term average of 3.2%. So you're earning 4%, but your money is losing 3.2% of its purchasing power every single year. Your real return? 0.8%, less than 1%. You're making $800 a year in actual inflation-adjusted gains on $100,000. But wait, it gets worse, because we haven't talked about taxes yet. That $4,000 in interest, it's taxed as ordinary income. If you're in the 22% tax bracket, which is pretty common for someone who's managed to save $100,000, you're paying $880 in taxes on that interest. So your after-tax return is $3,120. Now, subtract inflation, $3,120 minus $3,200 in purchasing power loss equals you're actually losing $80 per year in real terms. You saved $100,000, and it's shrinking. Now you might be thinking, okay, Dan, but I need that money to be safe. What if there's an emergency? What if the market crashes? What if I lose my job? And look, I get it. I really do. The psychological comfort of seeing that $100,000 number in your bank account is powerful. It feels like security. It feels like you've made it. And the idea of doing anything with it that involves even a tiny bit of risk makes your stomach turn. This is where it gets really interesting, because what you're experiencing is something behavioral economists call loss aversion. Research from Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky shows that psychologically, losses feel about twice as painful as gains feel good. So the pain you'd feel from losing $10,000 is roughly twice as intense as the pleasure you'd feel from gaining $10,000. This is why people freeze when they hit six figures. The fear of going backwards is so strong that it completely paralyzes them from moving forward. But here's what most people don't realize. By doing nothing, you are going backwards. You're just going backwards so slowly that you don't notice it in real time. It's like gaining 1 pound per year. You don't see it day to day, but look back after 10 years and suddenly you've gained 10 pounds. Here's the thing about that $100,000. How much of it do you actually need to keep liquid for emergencies? The standard advice is 3 to 6 months of expenses. Let's say your monthly expenses are $4,000. That means you need $12,000 to $24,000 maximum in your emergency fund. Let's be extra conservative and say $30,000. That means you have $70,000 sitting there doing absolutely nothing useful. That's $70,000 that could be working for you, growing, compounding, building actual wealth. But instead, it's just sitting there, slowly being eroded by inflation because you're afraid of something that statistically probably won't happen. Look, I'm not saying you shouldn't have an emergency fund. You absolutely should. But having $100,000 in a savings account isn't an emergency fund. It's an excuse. It's a security blanket that's actually making you less secure over time. Let me show you what I mean with some actual numbers, because this is where people's jaws usually hit the floor. Let's say you take that $70,000 and you invest it in a simple index fund like the S&P 500. Historically, the S&P 500 has returned an average of about 10% per year over the long term. Some years more, some years less, but 10% is the historical average. After 1 year, $77,000. After 5 years, $112,742. After 10 years, $181,564. After 20 years, $471,283. Meanwhile, your $70,000 in savings at 4% interest. After 1 year, $72,800. After 5 years, $85,170. After 10 years, $103,659. After 20 years, $153,167. The difference after 20 years? $318,116. Read that again. By keeping your money safe in a savings account, you're potentially giving up over $300,000. And here's the crazy part. The S&P 500 isn't even a particularly aggressive investment. It's literally just owning a piece of the 500 largest companies in America. Companies like Apple, Microsoft, Amazon. You're betting that American businesses will continue to exist and make money. That's not exactly a wild gamble. But Dan, what about crashes? What about 2008? What about 2020? Okay, let's talk about it. Let's take the absolute worst-case scenario in modern history, the 2008 financial crisis. If you had invested $70,000 in January 2008, right before everything went to hell, by March 2009, it would have been worth about $37,000. You'd have lost 47% of your money. That's terrifying, right? That's exactly what you're afraid of. But here's what actually happened next. If you had just held on, just left it alone and didn't panic sell, by 2012, you'd be back to $70,000. By 2015, you'd have $100,000. By 2020, even with the COVID crash, you'd have $180,000. And today, you'd have over $400,000. The people who lost money in 2008 weren't the people who stayed invested. They were the people who panicked and sold at the bottom. They were the people who looked at their account when it was down 47% and thought, I need to get out before I lose everything. They locked in their losses. Meanwhile, the people who just did nothing, they're millionaires now. Here's what I want you to understand. The real risk isn't market volatility. The real risk is inflation and opportunity cost. The real risk is working your entire life, saving diligently, and then retiring with half the purchasing power you thought you'd have. Let me put this in perspective. At 3% inflation, your money loses half its value every 24 years. So if you're 30 years old right now with $100,000 and you just leave it in a savings account, by the time you're 54, it'll have the purchasing power of $50,000 in today's dollars. By the time you're 78, $25,000. You worked so hard to save that money, and inflation is just going to slowly, quietly, invisibly steal it from you. That's the real risk. So here's what you actually should do with your $100,000. This is the strategy that makes both mathematical and psychological sense. Step 1. Keep $20,000 to $30,000 in a high-yield savings account. This is your emergency fund. This is your peace of mind money. This is what lets you sleep at night. Don't touch it unless there's an actual emergency. Step 2. Max out your tax-advantaged accounts. If you have access to a 401k and you're not maxing it out, that needs to be priority number 1. In 2024, you can contribute $23,000 per year. If your employer matches, that's literally free money you're leaving on the table. Max out your Roth IRA too. That's $7,000 per year. The tax-free growth in a Roth is absolutely incredible over time. Step 3. Open a taxable brokerage account and invest the rest. Take that remaining $40,000 to $50,000 and put it in a simple, diversified portfolio. I'm talking about low-cost index funds, a total market fund, an international fund, maybe some bonds if you're particularly risk-averse. This isn't complicated. You don't need to pick individual stocks. You don't need to time the market. You don't need to be a genius. You just need to buy and hold. Here's the mindset shift you need to make, and this is crucial. Stop thinking of your savings account as your wealth. Start thinking of it as your checking account's slightly more attractive cousin. Your savings account is where money waits. Your investment accounts are where money grows. Look, the reason most people never build significant wealth isn't because they don't make enough money. It's because they confuse saving with investing. Saving is important. It's the first step. But saving alone will never make you wealthy. You're just treading water. Investing is what actually builds wealth. Investing is what turns $100,000 into $500,000. Investing is what turns $500,000 into $2 million. Investing is what gives you the option to retire before you're 70. And this is where it gets really interesting, because we haven't even talked about what happens when you keep adding to your investments. Let's say you invest that $70,000 right now, and then you add just $500 per month going forward. That's $6,000 per year, which is very doable for someone who managed to save $100,000 in the first place. At a 10% average return, after 10 years, $324,000. After 20 years, $1,181,000. After 30 years, $3,274,000. You started with $100,000. You added $180,000 over 30 years. You end up with $3.2 million. That's the power of compound interest. That's what Albert Einstein allegedly called the eighth wonder of the world. And you're missing out on it entirely by keeping your money in a savings account. Now you might be thinking, but Dan, what if I need that money in the next few years? What if I want to buy a house? Okay, fair question. If you have a specific goal within the next 3 to 5 years, then yes, keep that money liquid. But here's the thing. Most people don't actually have a specific goal. They just have a vague sense that they might need it someday. That's not a plan. That's anxiety disguised as prudence. If you're planning to buy a house in 2 years, great. Keep your down payment in savings, but the rest, invest it. If you might go back to school in 5 years, great. Keep tuition money accessible. But the rest, invest it. Stop using hypothetical future needs as an excuse to avoid investing today. Because here's what actually happens. The years go by, you never end up needing all that cash, and you wake up 10 years later realizing you missed out on potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in growth. And look, I cannot stress this enough. Time is your most valuable asset when it comes to investing. Not money, time. Because compound interest doesn't really start showing its power until year 10, year 15, year 20. A 25-year-old with $10,000 invested has more wealth building potential than a 45-year-old with $100,000 invested. That's not an exaggeration. That's math. The 25-year-old has time to let their money compound for decades. So if you're sitting on $100,000 right now, every day you wait is a day of compound growth you're losing forever. You can't get that back. You can't make up for lost time in the market. The best time to invest was yesterday. The second best time is today. Here's exactly what I want you to do after watching this video. Within the next week, calculate your actual monthly expenses. Determine your emergency fund needs, 3 to 6 months. Open a high-yield savings account if you don't have one. Open a brokerage account. Vanguard, Fidelity, or Schwab are all excellent. Within the next month, move your emergency fund to high-yield savings. Max out your 401k contributions if possible. Max out your Roth IRA for the year. Transfer the remaining money to your brokerage account. Invest in low-cost index funds. A target date fund is a great set-it-and-forget-it option. For the next year, set up automatic monthly investments. Don't look at your account every day. This is important. Don't panic sell when there's a dip. There will be dips. Keep living below your means and investing the difference. Here's the thing that most people don't want to hear. Building wealth requires you to be uncomfortable. It requires you to do things that feel risky, even when statistically they're not. It requires you to challenge the voice in your head that says, keep it safe, keep it safe, keep it safe. That voice isn't protecting you, it's limiting you. Your parents' generation could retire on a pension and Social Security. Your generation, you're going to need millions of dollars saved to maintain your lifestyle in retirement? The median retirement savings for Americans in their 60s is around $200,000. Do you know how long $200,000 lasts in retirement? Not very long. This isn't about greed. This isn't about getting rich quick. This is about giving yourself options. This is about not being 65 years old and realizing you can't afford to retire. This is about not being dependent on Social Security that might not even exist in its current form by the time you need it. You've done the hard part. You saved $100,000. That's incredible. Most people never even get there. But now you need to do the smart part, which is putting that money to work. Look, I'm not a financial advisor. I can't tell you exactly what to do with your specific situation. But what I can tell you is this. The biggest financial regret you'll have in 20 years won't be a bad investment you made. It'll be all the great investments you didn't make because you were too afraid. Fear is expensive. Playing it too safe is expensive. And keeping six figures in a savings account is just one of the most expensive financial mistakes you can make. And you've got $100,000. Now make it work for you instead of against you. If this video helped you see your money differently, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want more content about building actual wealth instead of just treading water. And drop a comment telling me what you're going to do with your $100,000 after watching this. Because here's my prediction. A year from now, you're either going to wish you'd watched this video, or you're going to be grateful that you did and actually took action. Which one is it going to be?